Now, it is my pleasure right now. We're going to get into the facts and stats of it. It's my pleasure to introduce our first presenter, Steve Bushane, CEO of Family Enterprise Canada, on the new leadership of family enterprise within Canada. Steve became CEO of Family Enterprise Canada and the Family Enterprise Foundation in 2024 after co-founding Bo's Brewing and growing it into a national leader in craft beer and sustainability. And it's too bad we didn't have some of that beer with us this morning here, Steve. Or maybe later. Steve is a dynamic advocate for family enterprise. He now drives FEC and FEF's mission to empower Canada's business families. Family Enterprise Canada recently commissioned the first report since 2020 conducted on the state of family business in Canada. And we are fortunate today that we will be the first to hear the results from this report. The findings reveal a story of change, resilience, adaptation, and through this report, you will learn what hundreds of family businesses from across Canada have disclosed about their priorities, pressures, and plans. Please join me in welcoming Steve Bushane.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Hi, how is everyone doing today? Fantastic. It's nice to know that it's cold out there, but it's really warm in here. So really appreciate all the warmth that I've been greeted with today. So my name's Steve Bushane, which you just heard, President CEO of Family Enterprise Canada and Family Enterprise Foundation. And before I get too far here, I want to say thank you to Rod Senft and the Senft family, as well as the Asper School of Business and the Stu Clark Center for Entrepreneurship for having us here. And I also want to say hi to all the folks online watching this. A lot of our members are out there, so that's great to be sort of in a room that's this full and know that there's a whole country watching along with us at the same time. Today's a bit of a milestone for us. We're giving you our first sneak peek at some new research that we've had completed for us. And I think sort of the big question we wanted to sort of say is why now? Why is it important that this research is coming out now? And the reality is so much has changed in the last 5 years. And at Family Enterprise Canada, we keep hearing stories from family members, stories from our advisor community about things that are changing in family businesses. And what we didn't have was empirical data to weigh against this, to know which stories are outliers and what are the common threads that all family businesses are facing right now. We're looking to match the evidence with the anecdotes, basically, and what we're getting into here. There's a lot of reasons why this research matters. The first is to help us unify our voice. When family businesses talk about their experience, it's nice to know that you're not an outlier, that your experiences have a common thread. We also think it's important for families to be able to plan with real data, to understand where their gaps are, where the benchmarks are in the economy with other family businesses, and make better plans. And the other big piece here is that we're hoping that family businesses can become a bigger part of policy discussions. I want to be really clear, Family Enterprise Canada is not a lobby firm. We don't do government relations. But what we feel is there's not enough understanding of family business for there to be really good conversations about what policy should be. And so this next slide here This is the data from 2020. So we are in the process of updating it, but you can see the impact that family businesses have. It's 36% of total Canadian GDP comes from family businesses. And if you think about it in terms of the sort of the business side of it, family businesses are about 50% of the total business contribution to GDP. And we're even higher percentage when it comes to the workforce. So we punch above our weight class when it comes to job creation. But we don't hear about family business in the media. We don't hear government talking about family businesses. Government likes to talk about small, medium enterprise. Media loves big business. The reality is our family businesses are small, they are big, and they're everything in between, but they are also unique, and they've got unique challenges and unique opportunities. And if we're not coming to the table with good research and good data, we get forgotten in the conversation, I think. And I think that's a big part of what we're trying to do now. What I'm going to do today, again, is to try to connect the research to the stories that we're hearing. I'm not the economist that put this together, so if you're going to ask really tough questions about the double-blind survey stuff, I'm going to have to refer you. But what I can do is connect the stories of my own personal journey and the stories that we're hearing from our members to what we're seeing in the data. And that's why I'm hoping we use this not as, here's 50 slides of charts, but instead here's some really interesting themes and here's some really great stories that are coming from the data and connected to it. I want to acknowledge that this study would not have been possible without the leadership of the James A. Burton and Family Foundation. They've been incredible supporters, not just of this study, but of Family Enterprise Canada and Family Enterprise Foundation, not just in terms of financial support, but in real thought leadership and dedication to our cause. And so, we owe them a huge debt of gratitude. We also owe them a huge debt of money. But they've been instrumental in the creation of this work. So I thought it'd be worthwhile to start with my own story and then start connecting some of the things we're seeing to lots of different stories as well. So I come to Family Enterprise Canada from the family business side. And in somewhat of an interesting way, my father and I decided to start a brewery together. In 2005, my father had been running a textile business, and that whole industry moved offshore. And he decided he did not want to move with the business, but instead was going to shut it down and needed to figure out what he was going to do next in his journey. And I was living in Toronto at the time doing business planning for the Ontario government. He came, sat down with me, and basically said, I'm shutting this business down. I've got some business opportunities. Could you help me kind of think through which one I should pursue? And so we sat down, we started going through them, and wouldn't you know, one of the ideas he brought forward was, Steve, you're a home brewer. You're always bringing home these weird micro-brewed beers. Remember, this is 2005. This is before craft beer was super cool in Canada. And he said, what if I was to open a brewery? And I instantly said, well, if you're serious, Dad, not only do I think this is a great idea, but I'm willing to quit my job, sell my house, move home. I'll start a brewery with you. And so, yeah, go figure, right? Kid in their 20s. And so we spent the rest of the day dreaming up this brewery that we were going to open. And the next day we sobered up, and it still seemed like a good idea. And so we just started working on it. And July 1st, 2006, the very first batch of beer was released to the public. We started off as small as you could possibly start a brewery. We had zero experience in the brewing industry. We didn't even have industry experience in like consumer packaging goods. But we had a lot of passion and we had a lot of enthusiasm, and we, I guess, had a naive belief that this wasn't going to be as hard as it actually was. But we started working on it, and we very quickly went from a simple organization to a fairly complex organization from a couple standpoints. The first is we grew by between 40 and 80% every single year for the next 15 years. So we went from the smallest to one of the largest companies in the craft brew space. And then the other thing we did is we complicated it by allowing all the family members to join in, both from an ownership and an employee perspective. So we're talking my mom, my brother, my brother's wife, my sister, her husband, a bunch of cousins, uncles, aunts, and then friends. We're like, if we're going to involve the whole family, why not involve all of our friends as well? So we started an employee ownership program. We made this thing as complicated as humanly possible, and we did not have a good understanding of the governance that was required to do this. So the company became more and more complex, both from, it's a lot easier to manage 10 people than it is to manage 150, and it's a lot easier to have a conversation with one fellow owner than it is to have a conversation with, 100 owners. So that was kind of our dynamic, and I learned a lot of things about family business, both in terms of the advantages of having, the loyal family members and the cohesion there, and I also learned the hard way about, how to deal with entitlement, how to deal with the concept of equal or fair. All of these things were coming up, and I learned most of my lessons the hard way by doing it wrong. And at the same time, I really became passionate about family enterprise. So around 2015, we did a transition where my mom and then my father retired from the business. Dad was still active on the board of directors, but really kind of stopped in terms of the operation of the business. And I felt like, I had a good 15, 20-year run before I had to really worry too much about that. And then my family was hit with multiple tragedies at the same time. And the business was also hit with COVID at the same time. So we were juggling crisis, tragedy, and financial strain all at the same time. And what we had not done, one of the lessons I've learned very hard, is we didn't have a contingency plan. For myself and from a financial perspective. So we had to make a very difficult decision. I had to either be there for my family or for my business. It ended up being actually a very easy decision to make, but an incredibly painful one. So we sold the business early 2022. And that allowed me to deal with the family crises and also transition out of the business. And coming out of that, because all things pass eventually, one way or another, I was looking for my next adventure. And I came across the notice that Family Enterprise Canada was looking for a new CEO. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. I can have the impact, I can create another company, and that was actually my plan at the time. Was to start a new business, or I could help impact hundreds, if not thousands, of Canadian family-run businesses. And what really resonated with me was it felt like a lot of what I'd gone through with my family was just torture for the sake of torture. And all of a sudden, this gave me an opportunity to take what had happened to me and turn those into lessons and enthusiasm and passion for family businesses to help other family businesses thrive. So I sat down with the board of directors, and I convinced them that I would be an okay fit for the role, which is still surprising me. And I started working on this about 18 months ago. So I think more of you know about Family Enterprise Canada than you probably think think you do, because we've had so many name changes and branding changes over the years that it's probably something where you're like, oh, really, you're them? So, and maybe Grant actually asked me to do this with a show of hands. So for dramatic flair, who here remembers CAFE, Canadian Association for Family Enterprise? Okay, look at all of you. Okay, great. We have a 30-year rich history, and we've had our ebbs and flows, and we've had our mergers, and we've had a number of things we've done really well. We've got families that attribute the success of their entire family to Family Enterprise Canada. I think that's maybe sort of an overstatement, but that's their statement. We've also, in our 30 years, done some things not so well, and we've made our mistakes along the way as an organization. And the board brought me in really to reinvigorate Family Enterprise Canada and to bring Family Enterprise Canada back to a local level across the country. So in particular, we know in Winnipeg, we used to be incredibly strong. We can see that with the show of hands. And my role is to bring that strength back, and to do that, we don't want to do this alone. So we're really happy to be here with the Asper School. We're here to be here with Stu Clark Center, because we see that our path back to relevance is not one where we are the citadel of all knowledge, but rather that we work with partners and bring value from across the country to members where they're at. So we offer a lot of programming. We've got peer support groups, education, quite often in partnership with universities. And we also offer a lot of events and community building. And we also have a sister organization called Family Enterprise Foundation. So the foundation is the thought lab behind the work that we do. So this survey, which I believe I've given the longest introduction to ever, that I'm about to start teasing you with here, is from the foundation side. So and then one of the interesting things we do with the foundation is we turn a lot of the work that we do into licensable materials that then other organizations use for teaching purposes and things like that. So that's the foundation. Now let's talk about this report. So what I'm going to be sharing today is part one of 3 components that are going to make up the Burton Report on Canadian Family Business. The first part, which we now have access to the data, is a survey of Canadian families. The second part of the work that we're doing, which we're actually just undergoing right now, is we're selecting from that group a smaller number to do a deep dive, kind of get the thinking or the rationale, the reason behind the reason for some of the answers that we got in the survey. And then the third piece that we're adding to this is the StatsCan statistical data, so that we can update things like the impact on GDP and employment. And wouldn't it be great to know if those numbers have shifted since pandemic time? Shift up, shift down, stay the same? We really want to know this. So all of these 3 things are coming together for the Burton Report on Canadian Family Business, and we'll be releasing that next year. So today what I have is the results from that first part, the survey. So we talked to, it wasn't us, we got Abacus to actually do the survey for us. But the survey was was conducted with 524 Canadian individuals who are managers above at family-owned businesses with 10 or more employees. So that's a lot to take in. So again, 524 families, family-owned, manager or above, and each company had 10 or more employees. The surveys were completed between August 25th and September 8th, so it was all done in a very tight time frame. With the survey size that we've got a plus 4.3%, plus or minus 19 times out of 20 for the sample size that we chose. So that's what we did. Now, what's important, before I kind of go through sort of some of the themes and things that came out of it, is to understand who the respondents are, because that flavors the results to some degree. So out of the 524 families that we spoke to, the majority were in either professional services, construction, manufacturing, retail, or finance and insurance. All were at least 5 years old, and more than 50% were 11 years or older. More than 50% were wholly owned, and more than 50% were either in growth or expansion mode, but still a significant amount at maturity. In terms of how many family members are involved in the organization, you can see more than 50% have at least 3 family members actively working in the family business, and more than, and it's actually 70% have 3 or more family members who are owners of the family business. When we look at some of the survey results later, it's important to understand the roles that people play in the survey. So more than 50% were sort of the majority owner of the business, or in the lead executive role. And 67% of the families we spoke to had more than one generation actively working in the business at the time of the survey. From a demographic perspective, we were able to get respondents from right across the country, maybe a little bit lower than we would have liked in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, but still made sure that we got respondents right across the country. And one of the most interesting things we asked, I think, is what governance structures do you have in place? Because again, when we're understanding what companies are facing, understanding what kind of governance they have in place is pretty impressive. 41% have a board of directors. Only 19% have a working shareholders agreement. And you can see through 11% of family businesses don't have any of these governance structures in place. So from an advisor perspective, that shows a lot of opportunity here. And from a family perspective, this shows an incredible amount of risk that family businesses are taking on unnecessarily right now. So now I'm going to get into sort of the stories that came out of the data that we received. And I'm going to do this in terms of themes, as opposed to from a just here's a bunch of data perspective. And the first theme that we sort of dove into is resilience. So we asked a number of questions to kind of test out how resilient our Canadian family enterprises have been. And the first thing we asked was how well they feel they've adapted over the last 5 years. And what's great, 92% of families feel like they've adapted. I think the truth here is that 53% they did it, but man, it was tough. And I think sort of the amount of challenge that families have had to face over the last 5 years, but have come through on the other end with more resilience is really sort of a great thing. We get to talk to a lot of our members. We had one member telling us, when COVID hit, they were a traditional print business. And within months' time, they had to convert their entire business from traditional to digital print. And now they're a 100% digital printing and digital marketing firm. And they had no time to implement, but they did it, and they're thriving because of it. So the resilience that they've built out of this has been an incredible thing to see. And we're hearing lots of stories like that. We also asked, do you want this business to stay in the family? And I think these are super encouraging numbers. A total of 94% of families either say definitely or ideally, but it depends on the circumstances. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those circumstances are, but spoiler alert, it's willingness and readiness of the next generation that are the sort of the big drivers of that uncertainty, or the circumstances that have to be right. We also looked at resilience in terms of, are you investing in your people? So we asked, are you paying a living wage? What are your policies that support employee well-being, social justice, and sustainable development? And it's important to note these are self-reported numbers and they are not third-party verified. So the accuracy of this is not the point, it's the intention of the family. So families believe that they are either already doing these things or they're on their way to fully implementing. Again, lots of great stories that kind of come out of this. There's a farm in Newfoundland just outside of St. John's, and they recognized during COVID that their seasonal workers were really struggling to make ends meet. And so they instituted living wage policy at their farm. They had to increase starting salaries by 26%. They had to guarantee hours during the off season, and they also brought in health wellness activities. And it was incredible investment, incredible risk that this family took on. And after the fact, they did some measurements, found that their turnover had reduced by more than 50%. Their productivity had shot way up, and from a business perspective, they were thriving after making the decision. So, kind of lots of stories about investing in the people in the family enterprises, and it's great to see sort of the data is reflecting that. Next big theme that we wanted to hit on is always the big, hot topic button for every family business, and that's succession. So we asked, in the past 5 years, how many have gone through a leadership or ownership change? And so 46% of Canadian family businesses have gone through one or the other, and obviously a good number have gone through both in the last 5 years, meaning 54% of Canadian families have not gone through an ownership change or a leadership change in the last 5 years. So what do you think what the next question was? Who's gonna do it next? So here you go. Really small number for the next 3 years, but within the next 10 years, 58%. Now I wanna highlight the 8% in the next 3 years because there's another question we ask later on that kind of makes you pause and wonder about that 8% number. Why I think this is such an important figure here is that we know that Canadian family businesses are more community driven in general than their counterparts. And so if these Canadian family businesses make transitions that take the ownership out of the community, this could have a really dramatic impact on the fabric of Canadian communities. And I think sort of the impact here, if these businesses transition to ownership outside of their community, will be profound, and we'll be looking at a very different country in 10 years' time if they don't stay within the family. So then we wanted to see, well, what are your concerns? So we asked the families, what are your big concerns about a transition that's coming up? And here again, no surprise what the two big ones are. Next generation's not interested, next generation's not willing. But look at this long list of things that are still significantly of concern to families. Lack of a clear succession plan, potential for conflict, financial challenges, risk of losing customers, current leaders being reluctant to take a step back, and the tax implications. Now, the second last one, current leaders not willing to take a step back, I will remind you that 55% of the people who responded are those leaders. And so this is kind of a you might get a different answer if you asked more of the next gen folks. So there's a bunch of things that you have to understand who took the survey to really understand what's in the data here. It's also important to note that 90% of these companies want the next generation to take over. If 90% want this to happen, why do 28% not have a clear succession plan? Why is the next generation not interested? What is preventing families from working on these core issues? And I think this is, again, if you're an advisor, this is a massive opportunity. If you're a family, this is a massive risk you're taking on if you're not working on these things. So again, not the best story ever, but there's a furniture company in just outside of Waterloo region, Snyder's Furniture, and they just assumed that the next generation was taking over, and just assumed until it was basically time to transition, and then the son said, "I want to be a teacher. I don't actually want to do this." And so the family basically didn't know what to do. The founder tried to stay on longer, hoping that something would change. It didn't. They ended up having to sell the company, lost a tremendous amount of value of the company in the meantime. And at the end of the day, some planning, some conversation, some communication could have avoided a lot of loss of value and had a much better outcome for the family. So this stuff is real. We also then asked, what are you currently facing? So the first question was, what are you worried about? This question is, what are you currently dealing with? And there's so much meat in this answer here. The first is, again, you see the first response, families are dealing with a lack of readiness or willingness. But now look at the second one. The aging of the key family leaders. So this is saying that, again, the fact that sort of the founder or the current generation is still there, and they're reaching an age where this is now a concern for the family. Only 8% of businesses are planning on selling in the next 3 years, but 29% are already at a point where they're worried about the age of the leader. So this, again, it highlights the amount of risk that Canadian family businesses are taking on, and it's this this sort of feeling of invincibility, or it'll happen to someone else, it won't happen to me, that I think is driving a lot of that. The other thing that's just really wild here is you see the area that's kind of highlighted. You can't really see the color green there, but there's 3 items in particular. So family conflict on the business direction, disagreements on ownership and leadership roles, mental health and emotional strain. For the companies that have gone through a transition in the last 5 years, those numbers skyrocket. From 25% are worried about it that haven't gone through a transition, 37% have had it happen. It's a major impact for their company today. 22% disagreement to 32, 22 to 33. So what this is telling us, families are worried about these things. They're not worried enough, because the rate that it happens is far greater than the amount of concern that's going into this. So it's great that we're concerned. We're not concerned enough. These things have to be dealt with, because it's going to become an issue. This part of this really resonates with me and my personal story. When we did make the decision to sell the business, kind of learned through the process, that's not a one question thing to answer. It's, who are we willing to sell to? What are we willing to allow happen to the community? What about the family members who are currently working in the business? Will they have a job afterwards? What about the family members that aren't working in the business, and this will impact their retirement funds and what they were expecting to get out of this from an investment perspective? And I can tell you, when we completed the sale, I sat down with every single employee, family or not, and kind of walked them through, this is what's happening, this is what's happening to your role, this is what the future looks like. And what really resonated for me was, did a lot of meetings over a day and a half period, And the amount of support and empathy that my employees had for me, knowing kind of what my family was going through, was overwhelming. I had 3 employees that really laid into me. And boy, oh boy, did they lay in. And guess what? 3 family members. So it goes to show that the amount of strain and stress that all of us were going under, and the ability to walk away when your family member is not the same as when you're an employee. So this has ongoing effects to my family to this day, and the number of families that we talk to that have gone through sort of a messy transition, and it creates generations of trauma, generations of problems. So like I said earlier, this is a concern for family businesses. It's not a big enough concern yet. We need to amplify this message. There's lots of public stories about this kind of stuff too. When the McCain family couldn't agree on a path forward, they literally had to split the company in 2. There's lots of things that kind of go from the very large to the very small with this kind of stuff, and it's tough. So here we go. We asked, to what extent is future ownership influencing your decision to be here? Are you coming here because you love what you do, or are you coming here because you want to own this afterwards? And go figure, people want to own the company. I don't think this is the most surprising data that we have here. It is an incredible incentive to stay involved in your family business if you know that there's an ownership stake on the line. So this doesn't necessarily tell us too much unless you pair it with the next question we asked, which was, if there was no ownership, would you stay? And guess what? 86% of family members would say, even if there was no ownership on the line, I would still come to work and I would love to stay with this. And this tells us one of 2 things, and probably both. They're finding fulfillment in the work that they're doing, and they care as much about the family's legacy as they care about the opportunity for ownership down the road. There's a company, Book Art Gardens in Victoria, and they've got this legacy of nieces, nephews, cousins, all coming in and playing key operational roles in the company, having never been offered or expected any ownership. And this is the great quote. I think you can find it online. But basically, it's what they asked one of the nieces or nephews. Why do you feel it's so important that you're working for a company that you're not going to have ownership in? And the response was, you don't need shares to feel like a book art. You need to care about the place. And that was, I think, really, really telling in this part of the survey. So next thing we'll talk about is the human factor, and we're going to start with mental health. And guess what? It's a problem. 69% of Canadian family businesses today have either had a major or moderate impact related to the health and well-being, mental health and well-being of their family members. 21% major impact, another 48% moderate, still 15 that have had a minor impact. This is something that is incredibly important for family enterprises to start talking about. There's already a lot of stigma around mental health, mental well-being in just the general population. But when you're in a family business in a small community, it is really hard to find people you can talk to about mental well-being, mental health. And we need to find, as a community, better ways to have safe conversations to improve the mental well-being of our family members. There's an example in actually in Manitoba, Lind Welding. They were going through a succession, and the succession was also happening in the middle of COVID. And so after 2 years of working through this succession plan, the son involved, he had burnout. He could not bring himself to continue in the role he was in. And they're halfway through succession, and they're in the middle of a pandemic. And they are one of the lucky ones. They were able to communicate about it. They talked through it. They decided to pause the succession plan, bring in interim management, allow the son to go, put the effort in. When the son was ready and felt able to, went back into the business, picked up the succession plan, and the transition happened. So this kind of thing can only happen if families are talking about it and acknowledging this is a real issue. And the stories kind of back up the data here. So there's an awful lot on this slide. But this is kind of, we looked at different change. I struggle here to say changes in family structure. We assume these are changes, but again, we don't have a version of this report from 5 years ago. So what I would say is these are surprising numbers, which we assume means that there's been a shift. I can't wait till we've done this report a few times so that we can see what kind of shift is actually happening. But between strongly agree and somewhat agree, 93% of Canadian family businesses say that they're no longer making leadership decisions based on gender. 91% say that they share a common direction for the business. 86% open to leadership being filled by in-laws, step relatives, that kind of thing. 85% have broadened their definition of family when it comes to ownership. And go figure, 74% would say that divorce, marriage, remarriage, blended families are not fun in a family business. In my family business, one of my siblings went through a divorce, and their spouse owned shares, held a key role in the company, and boy, was that not fun going to work the next day and dealing with that kind of stuff. So that one is, I think, sort of the most obvious. It is messy. Divorce, remarriage, these things are tough. But let's go back to some of the first ones here. I love the somewhat agree band on this slide because you either provide equal opportunities for gender or you do not provide equal opportunities for gender. There's no somewhat here. And I've got a great story from one of our members. So she was born one of 3 children, the only girl. Went out, got her MBA, and came back, and her father thankfully said, I'm going to trust you to manage this project. She did a great job with it, and then was given more responsibility, did a great job with that. Kept proving herself, and eventually was put into the role of CEO. But if you ask her about this, she's probably going to answer somewhat agree, because guess what? It wasn't easy for her to take this on, even with the support of her father. Her brothers weren't skeptical of her ability. They were skeptical of the acceptance that she would have in the industry they were in, and within the company itself. And a lot of resistance came from the staff in the company as well. So she's a great example where it's not a strongly agree, because it's still not equal opportunity. It's just that if you are really driven, the opportunity is now easier to achieve. And I think that's the size of that somewhat agree for a lot of these categories, I think, is really important, because what it means is that there's maybe a desire in some part of the family, but it's not universal yet. And so this tells us this is what we've got to work on. Anything else funny? Oh, yeah, there's another great one here. This is probably my favorite. So the second one there, our family shares a common purpose for the future direction of our business. Look at the overwhelming number, 91%. If you remember a few slides ago, 25% said they're having a conflict right now. This is crazy stuff. And even better than that, the ones that have gone through a transition, that number was 37%. So this is one of the paradoxes of family enterprise, and it's one of cognitive dissonance. Families can have arguments like nobody else can have arguments, and it doesn't matter the same. You know, it's just what you do in a family quite often. And so a lot of these families, if you ask them, are you fighting about direction? Yeah, we're fighting about direction. You ask them a different way, do you share a common direction? Yeah, of course we do. Because there's a belief that the things they don't agree on are less important than the family. And the cohesion that the family brings is what is driving this feeling that, yeah, of course we're aligned. Yeah, we're also having this massive dispute about direction, but yeah, we're totally aligned because it's the alignment on the purpose of the family. And I think this is just one of the most interesting things I've found personally out of this stuff here. Okay, I'm going to wrap up fairly soon, I promise. It's Deborah's fault, really, for giving me an hour and 15 minutes to talk, though, so take it up with her. The last theme that we wanted to go through is the trade and global market strategy. We would be completely tone deaf as an organization if we didn't ask about tariffs right now. I am crossing every single part of my body I can cross that 5 years from now this won't be nearly as much of a hot topic as it is today, and only time will tell. But for today, we have some responses here. So the first one was, this is just the statistics, but it was surprising to me. Close to half the respondents are actively selling products or services to the U.S. There's a CFIB report out showing only 4% of Canadian businesses were doing business small businesses were doing business in the States. So this is a much bigger number than I personally was expecting. And then we start getting into the fun stuff here. So because of the changes, what have you done? And so if you look, there's kind of a smorgasbord, expanded to global markets, shifted to Canadian buyers, and so on. What I love here is this made no major changes, 22%. I'm going to go back here. Only 43% of companies were doing business with the States, which meant 57% were not doing any business with the state, and only 22% haven't made a change. And what that tells us, if we're looking for silver linings, is the tariffs, the trade issues with the United States has woken us up. To have that number of companies that weren't even doing business in the States suddenly looking to global markets, reducing reliance, like this is a good news story out of all of the bad news that we've been getting. I don't know if you're familiar with Ganong. It's Canada's oldest candy manufacturer. They're out of New Brunswick. When the tariffs came out, they basically invested in new packaging, certifications. They're now selling into Asian and European markets that they were never in before. And so as a country, this has been a big wake-up call for family businesses, and it's incredible to see the ones that aren't changing is a small minority compared to the ones that were actively impacted. So again, the story here is things suck. We've got tariffs and trade issues. We've got export issues, currency issues, political instability. We've got supply chain. We've got everything. It's a great big mess of chaos. And the good side is chaos breeds opportunity. And so a lot of our Canadian families are looking for the opportunity that's coming from this chaos. But yeah, everything sucks. And then, again, to me, the story behind this data is that's a small number of folks that aren't currently doing anything. And I love the 3% that were willing to say, I have no idea. I just don't know what to do with all this stuff. That's a reality. There's so many things that we have to adapt to right now that I think it's a pretty fair response to say, I don't know. We're going to try some stuff and we'll find out. But, you know, there's not one of these things jumped out as like the thing that the family businesses are doing. We're doing a lot of things, and probably a lot of these companies are doing multiple things because we got to find out what sticks. And we're in this new world where you don't have past history to rely on, so you're working on gut, you're working on instinct, and you're just trying your best. So that's kind of the wrap up I've got. I think sort of there's a lot of good news here. There's a lot of things families need to address, and there's a lot of risks that our families are taking on that they don't need to. And I think this is sort of my big takeaway. We can't control what's happening with U.S. politics. We can't control whether or not there's going to be political instability. We absolutely can get a shareholders agreement put together. We can build a board of advisors. There's an awful lot of things that are in our control that we can do. We can look to expand to safer harbors. And my message, or the message that comes to me, is our families are doing some of this, but they need to be doing a lot more when it comes to sort of managing the risk that is inherent in a family business. So that's, I think, sort of going to be the rallying cry for Family Enterprise Canada. And as I mentioned, we're going to be adding in the statistical data and then the deep dive data to give us a bit more understanding. But from an overall perspective, I think this is where Canadian families are. We're doing a lot of good things. There's a lot of obvious stuff that we should be doing that we need to do more of, and we need to heighten our awareness of the risks in a family business. So I hope this has been fun for you. I've had a blast. If you're interested in finding out more about what we're doing in Family Enterprise Canada, you can scan a QR code or just reach out afterwards. You can Google us, that kind of thing. And thank you so much. I've got so much gratitude for being here today, and so much enthusiasm for helping family businesses. So I hope you found this a little bit helpful.
Steve, you don't get off the stage yet. We're hoping you'll take a couple of questions from the audience. If somebody has a question, please put up your hand. We have a couple of mics. Unless you can yell. Oh, right up front.
Thank you very much, Steve. That was fantastic. My question is, let me just share the story. When I was in my late 20s, I joined a personal advisory group here in Winnipeg, and it was very important for me as a young person joining my family business, and it helped set the stage for me to grow through that forum experience, and I ended up joining YPO after that, and I still am in that, I'm still in a family business forum, actually. So my question is, what are some of the things that we could do as a chapter here in Manitoba to almost restart or reinvigorate the personal advisory group in our province?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think sort of there's the what you can do, and then there's the what Family Enterprise Canada needs to do to support that. So we do find when we talk to our members, the biggest value that they get is really these, we call them PAGs, peer advisory groups. Because you get to sit in a group of 8 to 10 people that all are in their own family business. Some of them have walked where you're walking now previously. Others are going to walk through it soon, and some of you are walking through it at the same time. And that sort of isolation I spoke about before is really dramatic for a lot of family members in family business, because who are you going to talk to about this? You can't talk to your friends because they're all part of the same town, and everybody talks in small towns and things like that. So it's super isolating. So I think what you can do, one is think about it not just from your own personal perspective, but from your family perspective. For individuals like yourself, YPO is great if you're the leader of the organization, but what about your next gen? How are they going to build the resilience and the skills and have the conversations without the same kind of supports, if not more? So I wouldn't think of sort of being in a peer group as being sort of just for the leader. I think it's really important for your next gen family members to join a peer group. So think about it. Stop thinking about yourself, Grant. I say that as a joke because I know you're one step ahead on that. And then the other thing that we could really use your help with is kind of rekindling some of those relationships that maybe had waned over the last 5-10 years. So in one of the merger iterations, we went from having local boots on the ground in Winnipeg to a national model, and in doing that, I think we somehow forgot how important it was for Winnipeg to have a local community. And I can tell you, being here yesterday and today, like the community feel here is incredible. I've been to a lot of cities across the country, and the sense of community here is profound. And so if we use that to our advantage, I think we can very quickly reestablish not just the peer groups, but local events. Lots of great things can happen if we. And what I need from you is one, if you've tried us before, maybe give us a second chance. And if you're already involved, think about the rest of your family. Do you have a next gen member that would really benefit from the same services that we offer for you? Thanks for the softball, Grant.
Hi, Steve. Paul with 6P Marketing. Comment and a question related to it. You mentioned earlier 66% of the next generation are interested in the next of coming in, but only 24% were in. The gap, I think it has to do with the next generation sort of getting their feet under them before joining the business to get some self-confidence without joining. So joining direct sort of gives them a bit of doubt, let's just say, and sort of getting their self-confidence, I think, has some benefit. So that's my comment. I don't know if you have any thoughts or suggestions on that. And I make that comment because my son is with me here.
Oh, no pressure there.
He's in school, and no pressure. No, not at all. So it's that path, and so he's thinking of that as well. So I don't know if you have any stories or thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really resonates with me is a lot of family businesses believe that the path to get involved in the family business is working in the family business. And I think, Rod, your comment earlier today about you can get involved in ownership level, board of directors level. There's so many more ways to be involved in a family business, but most family businesses just basically kind of go with this binary approach of you're either working directly in that business or you're just not part of it at all. And one family we've been talking to had a really interesting conversation. They wanted their son in this business so bad, and they just kept coming at him, and he kept saying, I have no interest in your business. I don't want anything to do with it. And so then changed the conversation about working in the family business to learning about the family business. And wouldn't you know, on mom's side of the family, there was actually several generations of entrepreneurs who had all built, and some of these massive companies, sold them, and then the next generation started a new company. And so when the conversation happened, the son was like, I don't want anything to do with your company. I want to work on a company. I want to start a company. Like, I have entrepreneurial dreams. Totally changed the conversation for the family because they stopped thinking about it in terms of you need to learn about how to make this product, and more about we need to teach you the skills to be an entrepreneur. And suddenly the son's super involved, super engaged, because he's not thinking about it in terms of, I hate the widget that this company makes. It has no benefit to me. And now he's like, oh yeah, I want to learn how to build a company because this is actually useful for me. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I think sort of the getting involved in a family business, we need to broaden our mindset on that.
one more question? Anybody? All right, you left them satisfied.
Phew! Get off the hook. Thanks, everyone.